Blessed love and peace. Very interesting. Again, Fajr. Domingo. And an interesting dream. Observation of the eyes and continuation. For a number of years, even for many years, there are concerns concerning violations committed against me, against my body, whilst I sleep. On any given night, subtle symptoms and quiet communications, warnings, signals, hints of the violations. Symptoms on occasion being a bleeding stool, and or soreness of the anus. Mild could be from sitting in an uncomfortable chair for an extended period of time. Bleeding stool could be from consuming a number of poisoned peanuts or other vegan excesses. There always being some kind of plausibility of alternative cause that allows fading into forgetfulness. What else can be done otherwise? In this dolo trod. And yet, through the years, there is a continuing concern, a continuing consideration, a quiet communication. One of the things that factors into being married with a wife, and rather than presuming, oh, if there is anything happening, my wife can wake up and let me know. That's not it. It's a matter of having proper security and inviting a wife to reside within that security. A further viable and prudent option is collective security, working with kinfolk, particularly brethren who share a deen and who can be on watch, protecting each other in a militaristic style. Cohabitation within an apartment building, village, and otherwise. Trust. Yet we continue to search, or we continue to wait, we continue to welcome. In the meanwhile, we keep on living. Now, one of the things that there are a few things actually that precipitate these particular concerns and the increasing plausibility concerning the scenario of violations, albeit subtle violations, severe and subtle violations of the body. One is the first time I get locked up. 22 years ago. And being rendered unconscious, forcefully drugged to the point of losing consciousness. And after losing consciousness, waking up with my clothes gone, in a different room, in a different facility, not having any recollection of what actually happened to my body. I was knocked out, but strapped to a gurney in the middle of an isolated unit. That's waking up, knowing all types of wrong were done to me, done to my body whilst I was asleep. People put their hands on me whilst I was asleep, and I have no recollection of it, no waking recollection of it. The first occasion, and there are a number of occasions after that, such that I know what it's like to wake up fucked up. Without recollection. Such that once it's happened, once, twice, 3 times, who's to say it hasn't happened once, twice, or 300 times? Uno, dos, tres. Yet, where's the evidence? Where's the proof? Don't have no security camera 24/7 recording. Other priorities. So in the meanwhile, we continue the trot. Through the years, there is a continuing violations against my body when I'm in a wakeful state. Torture, many different types of torture, to the point of, and then druggedness, to the point of docility. And in that docility, that drunken docility, regularly acquiescing to being molested, physically molested by nurses for the administering of ongoing, periodic, regularly scheduled molestation, injection. Usually a woman putting her hands on me against my volition, taking off my clothes just a little bit, a shirt. Do you want this in your thigh or in your shoulder? Kind of questioning. Pleasant conversation, smiles, soft music, private room after waiting. And then a few questions, standard routine. Okay, here we go. You know the drill, don't have to say it. Take off your shirt. Here's the injection. Oh, that wasn't too bad. Okay, see you next time. Regular basis, years. Because otherwise, it's nasty. Regularly conditioned man, adult, to have one's body molested. Oh, it's just medicine. This is what's done. You know that. Ever since a wee lad, you've had your injections. Violations of the body. Awake and asleep. So, all that being said, as I am sleeping just a few hours ago, I have a dream. I have a dream today. And in that dream, I go to the public library and other public spaces, each where I am severely unwelcome. The people, the proprietors, hate me with a severe intensity. Particularly for being liberated, and even further for being less than. Intense hatred and hostility, quiet, burning, ice cold burning hostility and hatred towards me for being liberated and less than. It is very disciplined hatred and hostility. That does not directly come at me, usually, and instead tries to provoke me into becoming louder and angry, hostile, and hating myself to the provocations, such that once I cross the line, oh, the sirens come. Living years with these conditions in my dreams to become disciplined enough not to cross that line, to push back without crossing the line, whilst also maintaining the ability to cross a line and handle ourselves further, yet only with purpose. So in the meanwhile, amidst the provocations, push back, and what's up? So in this dream, just a few hours ago, I'm in the library, walking, provoke, hate, intense, but cannot speak, silent, quiet, collective. Yeah, the woodpecker, the sparrows, the blue jay, and now it's the cardinals with that tweet. In the library, provoke, provocations. Quiet, silent, collective, coordinated, hiring servants to provoke, hiring supposed and feigned allies and compatriots who are also less than but not liberated. The birds are less acquiescent to the woodpecker today. And the woodpecker is holding the woodpecker's ground, so to speak. So in the library, dealing with those conditions, unfairness, injustice, disrespect, but just bordering on the levels of provocation. And I become increasingly louder. I can hear myself. When I start to hear myself, I start to wake up, because I become increasingly self-aware. Speaking English. So it gets to the point of provocations where I start to speak some English or think in English. And I can remember enough of the dream. I become awake enough in the dream for it to play out. And the way it plays out is I stomp through the library, kinfolk, and becoming again further awakened and responsive to the provocations, because the provocations do cross the line, has crossed the line. So we're already in the authorization zone, because the culture of provocations tends to lose itself and the proper balance. So the green light is already provided. Thus, when I'm in the library, stomp, stomp, push, security arrives, librarians are quiet. Hatred. But can't do anything. Security can't do anything. I have not crossed the line in the estimation in the gray area. Other patrons of the library visiting the otherwise silent, can't do anything. A shared cipher is this dream. At one point, as I begin to directly challenge each one, and become a little bit heated, a little bit angry from the provocations, further awakening myself to self-awareness. As I become increasingly assertive, threats of guns and call-ups, and additionally, but at the same time, it's false threats, empty threats, impotent threats. And with that recognition, there's a calmingness. Still going on provocations and still me pushing back. But then there's increasing awareness, not just within myself, not just amongst myself, around myself, by others, in this scene, and additionally, of the impotence. The futility within the hatred, and the futility within the standard process of the Republic, of the power sharing, collusion, and corruption. There are limits, there are limitations, and there is evolution beyond the methodology. Evolution that is not taught by the prophets, not by Moshe Rabbeinu, not by Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not by Jesus, not by the Buddha, not by Lao Tzu, not by Sri Krishna. How to overcome the Republic, the corruption, the systemic intergenerational corruption of the Republic. The one who who confronts the Republic or encounters the Republic directly the most is Jesus. However, rather than lambasting the Republic, Jesus lambasts the religious leadership, is crucified by the Republic, and his apostles essentially become fused with the Republic, becoming the Roman Catholic Church. That's not overcoming the Republic. It's a co-opting the Republic, absorbing the religiosity and utilizing that religiosity for the purpose of continuing imperialism. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam does not encounter directly the Republic, even amidst the visitations, the night visitations, and additionally, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam deals directly with the tribalism, the traditional family tribalism of Arabia that is still relying upon a man being a man. Honor, family, relationship. That's not the Republic. Because the Republic is a revolving door, and even when one man beats one man, there's two other men, and then one man gets replaced, and then the three continue on. It's a tenacious thing, a phenomenon of corruption, of a loss of self, of a relinquishment of self for power, and then technology and otherwise. So Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, in overcoming the tribes, in strategizing, military conflicts, yes, but even further than that, senses of honor and shame, duty, filial piety, and otherwise are all factor into the establishment of the Ummah. And yet, and still, amidst the completion of the life of the generation around the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what is observed is the assumption of the Ummah into an effective Islamic Republic, so to speak. Very crass rendering or crass estimation. However, it's a matter of methodical corruption, distinct from Christianity in terms of the Roman Catholic Church, yet similarly unduly influenced by the phenomena of democracy and the Republic. Judaism maintains a certain integrity of knowledge of self and discipline of self and love of self. However, at the same time, it fuses itself with the Republic, generation after generation, civilization after civilization. And the bottom line within Judaism, and specifically within the tradition of Israel generally, is like whatever it takes, as long as it's not against ourselves. And it's very difficult for any other group to fault the children of Israel for that type of constitution, because that's pretty much every other group in one way or the other. The Buddha leaves society, so even not dealing with the Republic, leaving society, the household life has different prospects. It has a further efficacy, to be honest. We observe in dealing with systemic corruption like democracy in the Republic, by having an increased amount of autonomy and bargaining. Celibacy provides, like with Catholicism, Celibacy provides a certain autonomy and perhaps um, civilizational sobriety to effectively wrestle with the phenomena of democracy, the corruption of democracy, without necessarily conquering it or existing without it, but just keep able to fend it off to a certain amount. New religiosities. Still somewhat early to tell. Sikhi, Baha'i, even Rastafari. Um, in each of these respects, there is a methodology of religious communal living that readily um, proclaims and practices traditional family rather than specifically celibacy. However, each one is observed as being significantly attached to the phenomenon of democracy. Sikhi being attached to basically English-speaking civilizations or English-speaking political collectives. India, England, UK, US, Canada, particularly. Although even places like Singapore and otherwise, that's in the immediate vicinity of India. But there's still a very strong attachment, and still somewhat. Well, that's Sikhi specifically, not just Hindu, but Sikhi specifically. And then Baha'i, definitely strongly attached to democracy in the Republic, the United States, Israel, and otherwise. And then Rastafari, even. Rastafari is unique, it's interesting, and it's very new still. However, and also not offering itself as a religiosity, it's still very new to be able to definitively establish that. Still evolving too. The theology is maturing from the immediate experience of enslavement and downpression to becoming further sovereign and walking as sovereigns rather than as rebellions and revolutionaries. And it's a different walk. His Majesty Haile Selassie I shows, and Her Majesty Waisaramanan show. So Rastafari is still establishing itself in terms of that collective sovereignty in a genuine way. And in that process, what is observed is still an ongoing attachment to conventionality, technology, political status in terms of being a citizen or not, utilizing money and economics that are all very much leveraged and dependent upon democratically produced mechanisms and precepts, money, passports, and such. So, still very attached to the experience of democracy and the Republic and its corruptions. And it's a continuum. It is manifested, it's shared, it is a cipher. It is a telepathic bond citizenship is with every citizen. It's not just from politicians, it's not just from military, it's not just from police. It's every citizen. And citizens might be further independent from the droning effect of thought. However, there's also a recognition, a witnessing that when the conditions are intense enough, when it's called upon enough, there is that tendency of the citizens shutting down for the sake of the collective in an immediate sense, and reverting to a trope whose primary purpose is the preservation of the collective corruption, even at the cost of truth. And each being, each person, each citizen is a spiritual being wrestling, a child of God wrestling with that duality, with that corruption, continuously, even within those intense moments. And there's propensity, the spiritual being, the child of God, knows the wrongs being done, but at the same time knows the needs of the day and how citizenship provides for those needs of the day, particularly when having responsibilities, children, spouses, family, others within our care. So that is what we experience on a regular basis and within the dreaming. So a few hours ago, in the dreaming, in the hostility, the quiet hostility of the citizens and the civil workers towards me, provoking, and me increasingly pushing back, being vocal and hearing myself and waking up. What happens is that, again, the impotence of the threats, calling the police, calling the people with guns, calling the syringes and the sirens and the syringes, the impotence within each of those and all of those standard procedures, and that impotence being increasingly aware, the beings around me being increasingly aware of that impotence, the beings in the cipher who are sharing that dream at the same time a few hours ago, being aware of the impotence, the futility of the standard procedures, and the Republic not having much of a solution beyond it, and thus the evolution of life on Earth, human life, humanoid life, civilization on Earth. Quietly and increasingly manifesting the recognition of a need for solutions beyond the Republic that the Republic is not providing, the obstructions that the Republic is committing for recognizing and manifesting those solutions, the pollutions and harms the Republic is causing in endeavoring to maintain itself, and the pathways for beings to continue beyond previous allegiances, pacts, promises, threats, and otherwise, much like the Declaration of Independence itself. Those paths becoming increasingly evident. So, a few hours ago in the dreaming, as I become increasingly aware of myself and the conditions, and there's a quietness, and there's a shift. There's shifts, like even just within the process of seconds, because that's how dreams can be. In the process of seconds, the provocations, people, it's like hit and run kind of provocations, because cats can't stick around once being outed. So there's a cycle. There's a number of kinfolk, staff, and otherwise doing the provocations, to the point where, when there's the actualization, the recognition of the impotence, like the provocations kind of quiet and stop, and the stillness, there's still the hostility, there's still the air of hostility, but it's also an air of like paralysis, of just like, okay, we're just gonna have to tolerate this as much as we can bear. And in that process, what happens is, it's young people, it's a new generation because that's part of the process, standard procedure. All of a sudden, the eyes get lighter with the sunshine. Life becomes further visible. Give thanks and praise. Power of Soleil and light. The grace of the Most High, not the Soleil specifically, exclusively, but through the Soleil and through all our relations. Because I was looking at my eyes a minute ago, and it looked, to be honest, it was like that death kind of thing. But then when I look at my eyes here, I said, oh, wait a minute. Vibrancy and light. And it's not just because of a light brown or whatever, but that's what I was observing. And I'm reminded, just like a few weeks ago, being in a space and seeing a small girl, maybe 2 years old, having eyes that look like they're smiling and looking like a doll, and coming up to me and greeting me. I'm just doing my own due, and she's greeting others as well. And I look at her eyes and I'm like, and to be honest, usually when I see a child, I'm friendly and I do something, but on that occasion I said like boo or something like that, which was extremely untypical of myself. And because I'm concerned about what people are doing to her and why she's going up and talking to all these strangers on her own. And the man who's with her is not wearing a shirt and otherwise. So I already see it coming. I already see her approaching me before it happens. And I'm dealing with frustration in those conditions. Not at her, but around her, and trying to like respond, not just in a drunken way that's pervasive in that environment, but just like in a third way. So when I did it, she kind of paused and kind of looked at me. And then she's like insistent, and she says hi again. And then I mellow, and I'm not mad at her, and I'm not trying to be mad. I'm trying to be honest, I'm trying to be as nice as possible. I guess what I'm trying to do is kind of like be a comical, scaring, but at the same time let her know that I see the things that are going on around her and with her. And so I'm not going to be just the jovial, PC, jokey that probably most people that an adult man probably have the tendency of doing. So that was part of the purpose of that. So I say something like boo, and she pauses, and unafraid, undaunted, she kind of just looks at me, and then she says hi, and I say something again, congenial and additionally, and I acknowledge the man, presumably her far, just because that's protocol, and then recognizing like, okay, I could have not I could have done better or anything, but just like she needs something beyond what I just shared, and I didn't share some light kind of like pleasantries and responsive intoxication. So what I do is I go into my bag and I bring out a map of the rivers, and I share that with the Bafar. I walk down to where the Bafar is, and then I share with him the map of the rivers and explain that it's a learning tool. Not saying much, just leaving it at that, because again, it could be her far and still challenging conditions. So again, I'm not trying to be enveloped in the whole thing. So I share that as a foundation for any healing that is necessary and solicited in those circumstances. So that's what I was thinking about when I think of my eyes like this. And then vibrancy. So anyways, all thanks and praise to the Most High. So in that quiet, in the new generation, in the library, amidst the hostility and the pause and the paralysis and the observance, the recognition of the impotence of the Republic, the limitations and the evolutions beyond, in that millisecond moment, much of the staff is dissipated, much of the staff is gone, and instead it's youngsters, young people, children, and youth who are inheriting the legacy and making a decision while still being further sober, less corrupt, and facing a further prospect of life. And so during that sequence, I might have gone and left the library and then come back because I had things to do, so I had to walk through the library. So there I am again, going through the same thing. And in that latter stage of the dream, and again, it could be just seconds, and those seconds are like hours and days. Yet, at that particular moment, standing at the library and observing and experiencing the conditions of stillness with kinfolk around me, still hostile, maybe not as hostile as before. There's a young one standing right next to me. There's like a queue. I'm not in the queue, but the queue is like right near me or around me or whatever. And so there's a young one of light complexion standing right next to me, quiet and still. Because even the children, though further awake and like deliberating about paths and otherwise, at the moment, still significantly under the protection, supervision, provisions of convention. And so working within certain confines and standard protocols, standard procedures. So again, there's this young one next to me, a male, and he has something in his hands, and I observe what he has in his hands, and it's like I don't even look. I just already know before even like fully seeing and observing, and it is a dreadlock, and it's one of my dreadlocks, and it's not attached to my head. So I see that, I feel it before I even like touch it, and I start to grab it. I start to bring it back to myself, to touch that dreadlock and bring it back to me. Like, yo, what you doing with my dreadlock? And what I actually say in the dream, what I articulate, that I recall specifically, is that I say, "What's your problem, boy?" Sparrow flies away and back. But that's what I say in my dream, verbatim. "What's your problem, boy?" And I say, "Boy." And as I'm saying boy, like time slows up at that point, because it is a child, a male child, who's holding my dread. Without looking at him directly, I just see a light face, who's still and is not as angry, but is conditioned in the ways of the anger, and is holding a dreadlock. And again, it's a provocation. "Yo, what you doing with my hair, man? Da 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 da." And it's not man, it's boy. I say boy. And as I say boy, again, time starts to slow up, so that by the time I look at his face, he's got a beard, and it's blonde. And I'm still saying boy in my mouth as I'm seeing the beard. And he's still holding, and I'm grabbing the dreadlock as I'm doing all this at the same time. And then after I said it, I can't take it back, and I can't apologize. I'm going with it because at the time I began saying it, it is applicable. When I complete it, the time I complete it, it's not applicable. He's a boy. The standard showing of puberty, maturation, producing a seed, he's not a boy when I finish saying it. But it's already said, and I'm not taking it back because it's true when I begin saying it. No malice, just that's what it is. And him not necessarily responding with hatred or otherwise, and he's not like playing tug of war with the dread. He's letting me take it, and it keeps on going and going and going because it's a dreadlock. It's one of my strands coming from my head. And then I continue on. As I continue on outside the library, there's a young brethren that I know from a long time ago, from this land, from this vicinity, who's hired to be one of those provocateurs, and trying to like be my naysayer, try to say something, testify against me, not necessarily against me, but contrary to me, and trying to convince me of that contrary testimony. And I say, "Don't you remember me?" He's like, "Huh? Oh, okay." And I just keep on walking. And when that happens, his more, I kind of grabs him, and he's my age. But it's the young version of himself that I know from that age when I most recently see him in life, in the awakened state. Um, I call him by name, and he's like, well, "How do you know my name?" And actually, he's like, pause. He's not even conscientious enough, self-conscientious, to recognize that I just called him by name. He's looking at me like a stranger, like he doesn't know me from before, but he has this mission. He's been told to talk with me because here's somebody or other, and so he's giving that spiel, kind of like a Christian, um, um, proselytizing and trying to give testimony and ministry. Um, and I call him by name, and I'm like, "Don't you remember me?" And he's like, "Oh," and he pauses, and in that pause, I just keep on walking because I'm not distracted. I mean, I'm not weighed down, distracted by his. Again, he's a servant. He's a slave, not to Jesus, but to convention, who's trying to utilize him to dissuade me otherwise. So there's less relevance in the exchange. So I call him by name to let him know who I know who he is, and I know things about him because of that. Um, so I know the emptiness of what he's doing in that spiel. He's a child of God, and he has truth within him. But what he's doing at that moment ain't it. So I just let it be known by saying his name to him, and he still doesn't recognize me. So I continue on, and I somewhat amused, perhaps, somewhat a little bit hubris. His more approaches from behind and kind of grabs him, whilst he's kind of like in a daze, like not even he just not even like puzzled, but just like stilled, because his ministry is impotent. At that point, is rendered impotent, and it's just kind of like a stagnancy of like what to do now, kind of thing. Not even to recognize like what I just did. I'm saying his name, recognizing who he is, and otherwise. And it's at that point that his more arrives, and kind of retrieves him, and I just keep on walking along with the dread in my hand, the dreadlock in my hand, and continue outdoors and into the roads of creation and the awakened state, waking up. And when I wake up, it occurs to me, aha, my dreadlocks. Perhaps there's this experience of the night visitations that are hinted at, that are suspected through the years, involving some practice of periodically removing one of my dreads. And this was a thick one. This was like one about this thick. So like I only got so many of them, but at the same time I don't count them. I don't keep track. I don't. Again, even the dreads. Some kinfolk are enthralled with their dreads, and additionally, this is just the trot. It's not the hair itself. It's the discipline. It's the deen. It's the nazir, the vow, the relationship, the mindfulness, the mitzvot. So I don't count my dreads, and I don't pay a lot of attention. I mean, some people might say it's obvious because it ain't the most kept or whatever. So I'm not trying to be dirty. Not trying to be dirty. Just try to keep it clean with as much as possible, but ain't too caught up in it. Now, when I wake up and I think about, and I'm like receive that message of like that prospect, the potential of the night visitations amidst other types of violations, like carefully removing a dread. It could be easily done. The type, my hair type or whatever, I can be like actually cutting a dread and then in a certain way where the hair is perhaps blended into the other new growth, because that's the way dreads are, at least with my hair. So this is not cosmetic. It's not finely braided or whatever else. So underneath at the base of my scalp, there's a lot of fine hair, and I got mixed hair, so um, it's thick, yet it's thin, so it can be done in such a way that um, presumably a strand is cut and then blended in to make it less conspicuous. So when I wake up, I look, I'm like, yo, how many of these joints I got? How many of these joints have I always had? Um, and what I'm reminded of is that many years ago, I used to have a particular dread that was fused, two dreads that were fused together. And when I was counting my dreads again, like just checking to see how many dreads I have, checking to see are there any recent like evidences of removals or whatever. Again, even just the hint, the suggestion, the possibility, knowing what does happen to my body in the wakeful state without my recollection in the previous years, like what's going on today. So, and like, yeah, does this feel as full as it used to be? Aside from any prospect of going bald or whatever else, like, does this feel like it is with everything that should be? And sometimes, like, there's new growth, and there's breakage in terms of at the bottom of these joints, because again, like I'm not trying to, my guidance is not to try to like grow it and grow it and grow it, but just to let it grow. And sometimes in that process, amidst the forest wilds and everything else like that, when I sit down, and additionally it breaks off, so it self-regulates in terms of length to about being waist high, because that's where the sitting effect happens. So wake up and like, yo, do I got all the dreads? Is this all I should have? Is there anything here? And again, I'm like, it could be done in a skillful way where it would be less detectable, whatever. And again, it's like, one, not concerned about the cosmetics, and then two, if it is, then what? And if it's not, look at you. So what I do remember though is that I had this one dread a number of years ago that was fused on this side. So it was like two big dreads fused into one, and then and it was like a thick awkward fuse. And when I was looking, I was like, I don't feel that. I don't feel that double strand that's been there through the years, and I didn't notice it before. Don't pay big attention to it or whatever. Got other things to think about, and I'm like, okay, factor this in. So at the very least, we draw attention to it. Now that I've articulated all that and I've gotten to the punchline, what I'm observing now is this might be the double strand, and this might be where it was fused because the hair grows, and where before it might have been like right here and like very noticeable, when it gets longer it might stretch out and get thinner, and newer hairs grow elsewhere so that this strand becomes thinner. This would be evidence of the fusion, two strands, what I remember existing a number of years ago, compared to the one strand here. Now I'm just observing this as I'm articulating this, because before I'm like, yo, I remember I had that thick old one that would like stick out, and I was thinking about like, do I break it? But no, if I break it, then I might break part of it off, so I'm just let it be. And so now I see it, and that's what it was like, like proof positive of the joint that yeah, I remember I definitely had that one, and I don't see it now. And that was just a few seconds before recording this joint an hour ago. And I gotta check. Storagio. All right. So then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to like just record this joint just for the posterity. And now as I do it, I see, okay. This is most likely the double joint from years ago. And it has become longer. It has become thinner because most likely the root hairs, the hairs closer at the scalp, most likely, rather than just continue to grow as a double strand, have separated and are either independent now. We're going to go into the whole thing now. Also, well, still the Raggedy Ann or the Ragamuffin joint, but this is my hair, and the forehead might be somewhat receding hairline. Care less about that, but this is the middle part, and as you can see, it's all type of new growth or whatever else, and this is actually further straight than it used to be when it would just clump up and not grow. So anyway, it is what it is. You can ask Biz and all that. So that's where things at this moment, which I guess the lesson from this joint is to avoid jumping to conclusions. And that's part of the process of deliberation, being patient. And actually, that's like one of the mottos of the moment, which is patience and consistency. Patience and consistency. Patience in avoiding rushing to judgment, rushing to accusations, rushing to hostilities and aggressions, and like just taking a moment. Avoiding making serious decisions on the spot, and just taking time to weigh the evidence, to collect the evidence, to weigh the evidence, to weigh the testimony, collect the testimony, weigh the testimony. And in that process, is it still relevant? Is it still a priority? Oh, it still is? Okay, well then let's deliberate a little bit further. And we can have initial inclinations and like initial knee-jerk reactions, but at the same time, let's hold off. Is it necessary to respond to this at this moment? Okay, let's think about this for a minute. It's very beneficial very often to before even thinking of like that's what I'm gonna do, to just say, let's think about this for a while and sleep over at least for one night. Let it go through the dreaming. The counsel around ourselves. At least one night. And think about it again. Think about it further. So when there is an absence of a necessity for an immediate decision and for immediate action, when there isn't that necessity, deliberation. If we're still thinking about it, again, collect all the evidence. Let's look at all the possibilities. We have a formula. I gotta remember this acronym. Properly preposterous. Okay, so properly preposterous. It is an acronym. It is a it's like a mnemonic device. It's an acronymic device because it's not technically an actual direct acronym, but it's a quasi acronym and a mnemonic device. So acronymic device. Acronymic device. So properly preposterous. The first part, properly, Pro, that represents the probability of what is being communicated to us. What is the truth? What is the probability of veracity of whatever is being communicated to us? That we're called upon to make a decision. That's the first part. Proper. The second part, P-U-R. It's not spelled properly, but it is properly. The second one, P-U-R. Properly stands for purpose. What is the substance of this situation? Like, what is being solicited of us? Like, why do we care about this? What is our role in this? So the first part is like, how much truth is this? Who's the person? Where's the news coming from? What's the probability of it being accurate? And additionally, and then from that, like, what's our role? So what? Like, what do you want from us, kind of thing. The third one is preposterous, properly preposterous. So P-R-I. That represents priority. Okay, what you're saying has some probability to it, and we do see our relevance or purpose to it. But how much is it of a priority for us, given everything else that we're dealing with? Yeah, we see something here going on, but we've got things that are way further important than to deal with this at the moment. So that's the third element. And then the fourth one, preposterous. So it does seem to be probable. We do have a purpose in getting involved and affecting some type of decision. There is a priority. There's a sufficient amount of concern and necessity in our involvement. So then we get to the fourth one, which is preposterous. The P-R-O sound is process. So what's the process? We're making a decision, and then how do we go about implementing and in manifesting solution? So that's with each decision that we encounter, intuitively and intentionally, properly preposterous. And to provide duration, to provide time for that deliberation. Duration for the deliberation. Because there is an endeavor of, again, receiving the information, receiving the evidence, and then weighing the evidence to make those decisions accordingly. So anyways, that's what we got for today. And we have so many guidance, so many teachers, our ancestors, our parents, our forebears, who provide us with examples of these exercises of deliberation and decision making. His Majesty Haile Selassie I and Her Majesty Waziramun II. It may seem again that I'm just giving like lip service or just superficial, after the effect kind of references to the example of His Majesty, but at the moment, to be honest, again, I'm in project mode. So the complete thing is taking me away from what I'm supposed to be doing. So it's less of a well, ain't no excuses. What I will say is that, again, just reading the autobiography, that's a significant way of how we learn and how we absorb, is by viewing, by observing, by studying the actual example of others, our prophets and sages and ancestors. And again, in reading and studying the autobiography of His Majesty Haile Selassie I, there's so many occasions where His Majesty has to make decisions, make significant decisions that literally affect the lives of millions of people. Millions of people whose well-being is charged to his responsibility. And so we see, we observe, we study the processes of his deliberation. And he provides like a course book. He provides an explanation of his rationale, what he's weighing. Within these deliberations, he's making a decision in the moment when it's heated, it's hectic, it's stress, it's immediate decisions needed, and when he has when he writes his autobiography, Volume 1 and Volume 2, Uno and Dos, he has a space. He's in exile at that moment, and he has a space. One, to give an account of what's going on at that moment, what precipitates him being there in Bath, England, for the record, so the world knows, and it's for the cause at that moment. But at the same time, it's a historic record to study after the fact, of what his thinking is in making each of those decisions, articulating, describing what the conditions are, what the situation is. And then what he's weighing, what he's taking into consideration and evaluating when making decisions. And again, he's doing it for a very practical purpose at that moment, to present his case, in the case of Ethiopia, to the world at that moment, beyond just the political realm of the monarchies and potentates, but now it's to the religions, it's to the peoples of the world, before World War II even begins. Because it's in the interest of rallying support for the cause of his peoples of Ethiopia. So it's not just like a like retired life kind of reflection, memoirs, and additionally, it's his memoirs. He's a grown man, in his 40s. 40s. In his 40s. So he's a grown man. He's lived life. He has some space of reflection and learning, but at the same time, he's still in the thick of it at that very moment. And so, it's not a matter of him just being retired and being able to like just be relaxed and just reflect upon life and articulate it. He has to do that for his life at that moment, for the purpose of continuing on at like one of the toughest moments of his life, in order to encourage others to support around the world, to support the cause. So it's not a dilettante type of thing. It's a very practical, like, I'm doing this instead of making phone calls type of thing, because I recognize that this is going to be further beneficial to encourage the masses in this generation at this moment. And it just so happens that at the same time, because of what it is and who he is, and further, it has even further benefit in future generations, even these 2-3 generations later, nearly a century later. So he does talk about the beginning part of his life as a child and growing up, and his relationship with his father, and some of the thinking going into how he is raised, how he's brought up. And it talks about his ascension to the throne of King of Ethiopia. And then as king, some of his early decisions, his diplomacy, his groundwork in terms of building infrastructure and preparing the advancement and progression of Ethiopia, and then the conflict. So he gives a very thorough, obviously not all-inclusive, absolute, comprehensive rendering or description or explanation of his life and everything, but it's very beneficial. So again, we talk about deliberation in a very accessible, proximate way, accessible, proximate conditions and language, and a sovereignty with a sovereign mindset, that is increasingly proximate and accessible for each of us to practice ourselves amidst our conditions, wherever we may be, however we may be. That patience and that consistency is rife, is bountiful within His words. So, we give thanks to the Most High for that guidance, for that example, the insight and the teachings of His Majesty Haile Selassie I and Her Majesty Reza Ramanan, who is with them thick and thin, come what may. Perfect balance, husband and wife, king and queen. We give thanks to the Most High, Elohim, and blessed love and peace in Rastafari.